Imagine a world where the sky rains sulfuric acid, where the atmospheric pressure could crush a nuclear submarine like a tin can, where the surface temperature is hot enough to melt lead, zinc, and your wildest dreams of exploration. A place where the clouds themselves are poison, and the air is so thick it moves like an ocean current, dragging everything in its path. This isn't the imagination of a science fiction writer. This isn't a nightmare, conjured from the depths of human fear. This is Venus, the morning star, Earth's sister planet. The jewel of the evening sky that ancient civilizations worshipped as a goddess. And for 2 decades, while the world watched America plant flags on the moon, the Soviet Union waged a silent, desperate war against this hellish world. They sent probe after probe into the inferno, each one a technological marvel, each one a potential coffin. They were determined to be the first to touch another world's surface and survive long enough to tell about it. What they discovered would challenge everything we thought we knew about how planets live and die. But the greatest mystery of the Venus program isn't what they found beneath those acid clouds. It's why they stopped looking. In the early 1960s, Venus was the darling of the space age, the obvious next step in humanity's reach beyond Earth. Scientists called it our twin sister, and the comparison seemed almost perfect. Venus was nearly identical in size to Earth, just 650 kilometers smaller in diameter. Its mass was 81% of Earth's, its gravity 90% of ours. And critically, it orbited at what seemed like a habitable distance from the Sun. If life could flourish on one rocky planet in our solar system, the reasoning went, why not on 2? But Venus was a master of deception. She kept her secrets locked behind thick clouds that completely shrouded the planet in an impenetrable veil. No telescope, no matter how powerful, could pierce that barrier. Astronomers could only guess at what lay beneath. And guess they did. Some imagined tropical rainforests fed by constant rainfall from those eternal clouds. Others pictured vast oceans, potentially teeming with primitive life. The more adventurous scientists even sketched out elaborate theories of advanced civilizations, hidden from our view by atmospheric curtains. Venus, they said, might be a younger Earth, still in its primordial phase, full of possibility. The truth, as it would turn out, was far stranger and more terrifying than anyone dared imagine. The early 1960s was the height of the space race, and every achievement was a propaganda victory. While America announced its intention to put a man on the moon before the decade's end, the Soviet Union calculated a different path to glory. The moon was far. The moon was difficult. The moon was exactly what the Americans expected them to compete for. Venus was closer. Venus was achievable with existing technology. And landing on Venus, actually touching the surface of another planet, would be a historic first that would echo through the ages. It would prove Soviet engineering superiority. Once and for all, the decision was made. The Soviet Union would conquer Venus. But Venus, as they would soon discover, does not accept conquest easily. Venera 1 launched on a cold February morning in 1961, less than 4 years after Sputnik shocked the world. It was humanity's first real attempt to reach another planet, a bold statement of Soviet ambition. The probe was elegantly designed, packed with instruments to measure magnetic fields, cosmic radiation, and the solar wind. It carried a pennant with the Soviet coat of arms, ready to be the first human artifact to reach another world. 7 days into its journey, the signal died. Just stopped. Engineers frantically adjusted their antennas, double-checked their calculations, sent command after command into the void. Nothing came back. Venera 1 drifted past Venus 3 months later like a ghost ship, passing within 100,000 kilometers of its target, carrying its secrets and its Soviet pennant into eternal silence. The pattern would repeat with devastating regularity. Venera 2 and 3 were launched in late 1965, part of a renewed push to reach Venus. Venera 2 made it all the way to the planet, coming within 15,000 miles of the cloud tops in 1966. And then, at the moment of triumph, its systems failed. It flew past Venus without transmitting a single byte of data. Another ghost added to the graveyard. Venera 3 at least made contact. It became the first human-made object to impact another planet when it crashed into Venus in March 1966. But crashed is the operative word. The probe died on entry, its data lost, its mission a failure. Another step forward, another gravestone. The Americans, meanwhile, succeeded where the Soviets failed. Mariner 2 completed its flyby of Venus in December 1962. And what it radioed back stopped the romantics dead in their tracks. Surface temperatures exceeding 400 degrees Celsius. An atmosphere almost entirely carbon dioxide, with pressure readings that seemed impossible. No magnetic field, no water, no hope for oceans or jungles, or anything remotely resembling life as we understood it. Venus wasn't Earth's sister. She was Earth's evil twin, a cautionary tale written in stone and acid. But the Soviet engineers were not the type to accept defeat gracefully. They had lost the race to fly by Venus, yes. But there was still a prize no one had claimed: landing. If they couldn't orbit Venus safely, they would land on it. They would be the first to touch another world, no matter the cost in rubles or reputation. Venera 4 descended through the Venusian atmosphere in October 1967. This time, everything worked. For 93 agonizing minutes, as the probe fell through the toxic clouds, it transmitted a steady stream of data. The atmosphere was even thicker than Mariner 2 suggested. The pressure was crushing. The temperature was rising, faster than predicted. And then, still 25 kilometers above the surface, the signal stopped. The pressure had torn the probe apart, crumpled it like paper. They had learned something crucial, though. Venus was far worse than anyone imagined. And they would need to build something far stronger to survive it. The planet had won again, but the Soviets were just getting started. The Soviet response to Venus's brutality was nothing short of audacious. If the planet wanted to crush their probes like insects, they would build probes that were essentially uncrushable. Venera 7 was engineered like a bathysphere, designed for the deepest trenches of Earth's oceans, but even more extreme. Titanium hull, minimal instrumentation, every gram dedicated to survival rather than science. The design philosophy was simple: get there alive first, learn everything you can later. On December 15, 1970, after a journey of nearly 4 months, Venera 7 hit the Venusian atmosphere at over 40,000 kilometers per hour. Parachutes deployed. Heat shields burned away. The probe descended into hell itself, and for the first time, it kept transmitting. Down, down, through clouds of sulfuric acid, through temperatures that would vaporize a human being instantly, through pressures that would collapse a normal spacecraft like a crushed soda can. And then it touched down. Humanity had landed on another planet for the first time in history. The signal was weak, barely a whisper. It was distorted by the dense atmosphere, garbled by the extreme conditions. Soviet engineers spent days analyzing the data, arguing over whether it was real or just noise. But it was there. 23 minutes of transmission from the surface of Venus before the heat finally overwhelmed the probe's cooling systems. The data was sobering. Surface temperature, 475 degrees Celsius. Hot enough to bake a pizza in seconds. Atmospheric pressure, 90 atmospheres, equivalent to being half a mile beneath Earth's oceans. But instead of cold water, you're surrounded by a toxic oven of carbon dioxide and acid vapor. But they had done it. The Soviet Union had touched another world. Venera 8 followed in 1972, an improved design that survived for 50 minutes and 11 seconds on the surface. It measured light levels, proving that despite the thick clouds, enough sunlight reached the surface for cameras to potentially work. It was a glimmer of hope in the data. Maybe, just maybe, they could see Venus with their own eyes. Then came the golden age. Venera 9 and 10 didn't just survive the landing, they saw. In October 1975, they transmitted the first photographs ever taken from the surface of another planet. The images were grainy, black and white, distorted by the harsh conditions. But they were real. They showed a landscape of jagged rocks, angular stones, scattered across relatively flat ground, bathed in an eerie orange twilight. No flowing lava, no smooth volcanic plains, just broken stone, weathered by wind and heat, stretching to a horizon shrouded in haze. It looked disturbingly almost familiar, almost like Earth, almost like home if home had gone to hell. Venera 13, landing in 1982, captured the crown jewel of the entire program: color images. These photographs remain to this day among the most extraordinary images in the history of space exploration. The probe survived for 127 minutes, long enough to analyze soil samples with an X-ray spectrometer, long enough to record sounds from another world, long enough to paint a complete picture of the Venusian surface. The rocks were volcanic, similar to basalt on Earth. The soil was dry, ancient, unchanged for millions of years. And the view, that impossible, haunting view, showed a world that was once, perhaps, not so different from our own. The data from more than a dozen Venera missions told a story that scientists are still grappling with today. It was a story of planetary suicide, of climate catastrophe written in geological time. Billions of years ago, Venus likely had oceans, real oceans, liquid water oceans, perhaps even deeper than Earth's. The planet probably had a temperate climate, maybe even seasons. It had all the ingredients for life. But Venus made one crucial mistake. It was just a little too close to the sun. As the young sun brightened over millions of years, Venus's oceans began to evaporate slowly. Water vapor is a powerful greenhouse gas, much more potent than carbon dioxide. As temperatures rose, more water evaporated. As more water evaporated, temperatures rose further. A runaway feedback loop, impossible to stop once it started. Eventually, the oceans boiled away entirely. Every drop. Ultraviolet radiation from the sun split the water molecules apart into hydrogen and oxygen. The hydrogen, being light, escaped to space. The oxygen reacted with surface rocks, binding into the crust. What remained was a planet-wide greenhouse, locked in a state of permanent catastrophe, with carbon dioxide from volcanic outgassing, trapped in the atmosphere forever. Venus became a warning, etched in stone and acid rain. This is what happens when a planet loses control of its climate. This is the price of a runaway greenhouse effect. This is how a world dies. The implications were profound, and for scientists studying Earth's own climate, absolutely terrifying. By the mid-1980s, the Soviet Union had accomplished something remarkable. They had sent more than a dozen successful probes to Venus. They had landed on its surface repeatedly, photographed its landscape in detail, analyzed its rocks and atmosphere, and mapped its clouds with radar from orbit. They had achieved what no other nation had even attempted. They owned Venus. And then suddenly, they stopped. The reasons were layered, complex, tangled up in the slow collapse of an empire. The Soviet economy was crumbling under the weight of military spending and corruption. The costs of space exploration became impossible to justify as breadlines grew longer in Moscow and satellite states began to fracture. Political priorities shifted. Resources dried up. The focus turned inward, to survival, to Earth, to practical concerns. But there was something else, something less, talked about in the official histories. Venus had been conquered, in a sense. The mystery was solved. The planet was hostile, dead, unchanging. There were no more surprises to find, or so the thinking went. Why spend billions more to photograph more rocks that looked exactly like the rocks already photographed? The moon was humanity's future, they said. Mars was the next frontier. Venus was just a curiosity, a dead end in the story of exploration. The last successful Soviet mission to Venus was Vega 2. In 1985, it dropped a lander and a balloon probe into the atmosphere, before continuing on to intercept Halley's Comet. After that, nothing but silence. Today, Venus remains the most unexplored terrestrial planet within our reach. The surface the Soviets photographed in the 1970s and 80s is still the only alien landscape we've ever seen with our own eyes, the only ground beyond Earth that humans have ever truly witnessed. 40 years have passed since the last probe touched down on that broken, scorched ground. An entire generation has lived and died since we last walked, however briefly, on another world. And in all that time, no one has gone back. Venus keeps her secrets still, waiting beneath clouds of acid, burning at temperatures that melt metal, silent. The question isn't whether we'll return to Venus. The question is what we'll find when we finally do, and whether the warnings written in her stones will arrive too late for us to hear them. Some mysteries, it turns out, are more terrifying than we're ready to face.